Welcome back to another episode of the Optional Boss Podcast. I am your co-host, Josh, with my other co-host, Tyler.
Both of us are co-hosts. That's weird.
Well, how do you usually represent it? Because I don't want to say host, because it's both our show.
Vice host.
Vice host? Well, I went with two co-hosts.
Yeah.
So, today we are talking about games we want to play for the first time again. And pretty much what we're going to be bringing up. We're not too sure on how we were going to structure this episode, so there's going to be a bit of banter back and forth. But we essentially want to talk about the games that we have played, we really enjoyed, and wish we could go back to and play for the first time again.
How can you put structure on an experience?
You can't. And this is why we're going by the flyover seats. I don't know. How do you turn a phrase?
Fly of our sheets. I like it. Yeah, basically, I mean, there are just some games that are great, but never as great as they were the first time you try it. And I think it's pretty safe to just address the elephant in the room. Zelda.
You talking Breath of the Wild?
I am very much talking Breath of the Wild. It is probably one of the more modern examples of something that, as good as it is, it will never be as good as it was.
Yeah, that's something I've actually found myself is once I beat it once, I had a hard time trying to go back into it, regardless of how much time has passed. Maybe I could go into it today now that it's been... Because I haven't played Breath of the Wild since I got my Switch, which was, I think, half a year after launch, something like that.
It's a good while.
And it's been a few years now, because we're getting into old age Switch. And Breath of the Wild was absolutely magnificent upon a first playthrough, but anytime I've gone back to it just kind of fell flat.
I mean, I can see that. I know for myself that a lot of its appeal came from those first initial, wow, I can do this, or I didn't know about that. I want to say, like, the scenario that just absolutely jaw-dropping the first time I ever played Breath of the Wild was just out and about doing some exploring, as you do, and all of a sudden there was just this musical change and the sky went dark and I looked up and there's a dragon in the sky and I didn't even know there was going to be dragons in this game and I literally just stopped and paused and took in that one particular moment as where if I boot
before you died.
I'm sure I died shortly after that, yeah. And then just anything beyond that was just I'd seen it.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how many Korok seeds you went and hunted down, how many shrines you did, but the shrines I found very repetitive, and I'm not here because I really did enjoy Breath of the Wild, but to do them all again,
I mean, a
it's
couple
just
of
very
them
tiring.
Have very fun puzzles that, like, there's enough of them that you would certainly forget about them, but at the same time, you wouldn't completely forget about them. It would be like, oh, that's right, there's this one, and then it would all come and click together. And then outside of that, though I like them, I can eventually grow to not like them. The rest are just going to be the combat trials.
Yeah.
So,
I think it would have helped if they had a bit different aesthetics to them.
That would have been nice. You do have, of course, the ones that are essentially not their standard trials, and the only trial is to activate the shrine. And even then, those are going to wear out eventually. Like, you'll never have those aha moments twice. And even as, I don't know if you ever tried Master Mode for it, but it really didn't add more to the experience. It just made things a little bit more tedious.
I could see that. I know when I first started playing, there was such a sense of exploration, discovery, and just finding things. And then coming to terms with the huge environment that you can go and explore and just kind of getting lost in it. Like, yeah, you had the 4 divine beasts, but outside of those, it's like, oh, there's a shrine. Oh, there's a shrine. Oh, there's a shrine. And you could go do those, no problem. Yeah, they were neat at first, but it going back, it's like, okay, I've seen this world before. I'm no longer lost, as if it were.
It's not as big as it feels.
No.
And there's
no, by far.
You're also never going to have those like really cool discoveries ever again. Like, again, for example, the dragon. But the first time you kind of figured out that the updrafts happen from a fire, and then moving forward, your only thought is just to use it as an utility. And it's still cool, but it's not that, oh, if it doesn't get the gears turning the same way. Nor is it like your first time running into a Hinox or a Lionel. And especially, too, it doesn't help when you actually come to the conclusion that there's only, 5 different enemies in the game. But...
Yeah.
Yeah, but those things...
There's 5 versions of Ganon.
There's 5 versions of... 6, technically, if you count the pig.
Oh, yeah. I guess so.
I don't want to count the pig. The pig was disappointing. I think most people can agree that wasn't the most incredible final boss. But that's the thing. I don't dislike Breath of the Wild. I have booted it up a couple times since, and it's it has almost a Grand Theft Auto feel to it in the sense that I just like hopping in and enjoying the physics and the world. But every time I go to play Grand Theft Auto and you just kind of do one of those chaos rampages, do you really do it for more than half an hour at most?
Personally, no. I had more fun with the heists and everything, but you need some friends for that.
Yeah, and you can't bring people into the world of Breath of the Wild.
No.
Yet.
I mean, to be fair, if I brought friends into Breath of the Wild, I'd probably just troll them with lifting them up on platforms and seeing where I can get out.
Oh, it'd be so cool to just get 2 Magneses going at once and just fly around.
I mean, you gotta admit, the utility, just the different things that you could do in that game and how they all mishmash together was absolutely fantastic. And that's where a lot of the excitement came from, is the experimentation along with exploring this huge world. Relatively huge world for a Zelda game anyways.
I was impressed just by chopping down trees.
Fair. But once you get that, once you've explored a bunch of it and you know that you're never going to walk into Death Mountain area and start catching fire without knowing that you need something to protect you from that again.
You don't have those little moments of I don't have any of the armor, but I have a big ice sword, and now I'm a little bit better. Now it's just optimizing.
And that's what it comes down to. I'll never get that first time experience again with Breath of the Wild because my enjoyment was in that first playthrough, not knowing what I was getting into.
Now, do you know what's a similarly recent game that I can almost say I have very similar feelings towards?
What's that?
Mario Odyssey.
Yeah, I could definitely see that as well.
Just because it's one of those interesting cases of a game that I had a lot of fun with, and I think, it controls like butter. It is so much fun to actually be Mario in that game and run around and do stuff. But aside from just getting to the end of the game, I had really no desire to do the stuff I didn't do.
No, and there wasn't a whole lot of incentive to.
Once you start getting into the couple hundreds of moons, they don't really have the impact as the stars from 64. And it's not even that I'm trying to make an argument 64 was better because it was smaller or anything, but it just feels like when you can go pretty much get a moon, 3 steps, get a moon, I don't know, it just kind of cheapens the experience a bit. But having said that, that game was a lot of fun the first time I ever went through it.
Oh, hell yeah. I'm glad, opposed to Mario 64, every time you collect a star, it kicks you out, where Odyssey just let you collecting them.
Taking
But then I think there is an argument for the amount of moons was too much, similar to Breath of the Wild. The Korok seeds, there's just too many.
Well, and the fact that there was so many ways to get them. Like, I remember the one time I hopped into Odyssey just to kind of, like, mess around, maybe accomplish some of the missions. And I go to the shop, and I see that you can buy moons there. And I'm thinking, there's a finite amount of moons. These are part of the moons I need for this area. And, like, you could just keep buying them into the hundreds. And at that point, I'm like, I don't understand why I have to get these if I can just buy them.
Now, was that meant as a fast track to get to the darker side of the moon?
Oh, I'm sure it was, but at the same time, it now confuses me because these numbers that are supposed to be represented by things I do in the world have now just been filled by things that I can buy. So it's like, do I still do the ones out there? Did they magically disappear? Do they matter now?
Yeah. Or can I just buy them after so many coins? In which case, I'm just going to play the balloon race.
Yeah, it just doesn't feel right. But at the same time, it was like really cool that, cool, I could control a T-Rex for some reason.
But that was just in one world.
Of course it was in one world, and I'll only ever experience it for the first time once. But when I did, it was still really cool.
It was. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Don't let me take away from that. It absolutely was fantastic the first time you take that over and just start causing rampage.
Yeah, but now it's gonna be like, okay, so I guess I take over the dinosaur and do the thing.
But even if you go back to collect other moons in that world, even after that first time of taking over the T-Rex, it's lost how special it can be.
It just kind of feels like busy work at that point.
Yeah, and I think that kind of is a bit of a true testament, maybe not for everyone, but a bit of a true testament that too much of a good thing is a bit of a detriment because it makes it no longer feel special. Like when you're collecting stars in Mario 64, you're actively working toward that goal, and yeah, sure, Odyssey you are too. But in 64, it's more concentrated. You're off to set for that specific one, and they mean something.
Not only that, too. I don't know. I
mean, Odyssey had to fill out the Odyssey with stars or moons to get to the next world, but then after so many, you can do that while there's still X amount left in this world.
Oh yeah,
and a huge X amount.
It feels kind of daunting when you're like, you need, let's say, 18 to progress, and it's like, cool, but there's still 30 left here.
Yeah. It's like why would I bother with the 30?
Maybe I'll go get like a couple extra, and it'll just kind of kickstart me for finishing the next world, but by no means do I want to do all of these things.
And even by that time, you want to go to the next world to see something new.
Yeah, so...
And then that comes down to seeing it for the first time again.
I'll give it this, though. The Bowser boss fights were pretty good.
That it was. And... is it really a spoiler after it's been so long?
I mean, people are listening to us. They're going to know we're going to spoil stuff.
This is fair. So, of weird little situation, but if you haven't played Mario Odyssey and plan on it, small spoiler for the end. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. There's your countdown. Taking over Bowser at the end.
That was pretty epic.
Was fantastic.
Now, I will say that's the second time I've been able to do that in a Mario game, and it wasn't as cool as the first time. But that was an RPG, so it was a completely different scenario.
Fair.
Yeah, but having said that, Bowser's Inside Story, pretty solid game. Probably the best of the quintology. I don't know what the word... There's like 5 of them. But moving on from that, so what's something you would personally have a preference towards not knowing you've ever played?
So... one that I haven't played, or personally wouldn't want or wish I could play for the first time.
Do it again, yeah.
So I know we have a couple on our list. That's one thing I'll say right now is we have not shared our list together. So some of them are going to be the same. So I'm going to pick something that I know Tyler wouldn't actually have, and that's going to be Sekiro. And the reason is because Sekiro, it's probably one of my favorite FromSoft games, and I think I've pretty much played all the since Dark Souls 1. Anyways, I've played them all. I think. Yeah.
I don't think. Yeah.
Sekiro's probably I'd say securely my favorite. Just it's very snappy and whatnot. But my first playthrough, well, it was good. It took me ages because I couldn't get over the difficulty. And the issue is if I started it for the first time again, I'd probably still be under that struggle. But it meant so much more actually overcoming the bosses and the challenge in it. And I think that can be almost said for most of the Souls games.
So, if I'm not mistaken, the first time you tried Sekiro and you were kind of hitting those walls, you weren't as experienced with the Souls games. I want to say you'd played a few, but not nearly as many.
Yeah, so I played a little bit of Dark Souls 1, didn't get very far. I technically beat 3, but I was summoning help. I did complete Bloodborne by myself. Not the true ending, though.
So, did you go into Sekiro with the mindset that it was just another FromSoft game? Or did you go into it just thinking it was going to be a difficult game?
So I knew it was going to be a difficult game because at the time a lot of people were saying that this is the hardest FromSoft game. And I don't know if I would actually hold that as true or not. I think there's a lot of people going into Sekiro thinking it's going to play like a Souls game, and it doesn't. It's its own beast, if you will. But like knowing what I know now, I wish I could re-experience those. Like when I say I want to play it for the first time, I want no Souls experience, because that was part of my issue, is going into it like a Souls game or Bloodborne even.
Well, that's actually kind of what I was wondering, is if that potentially not so much soured your expectations, but just threw you off for the experience that you were intended to get.
So I'd say it threw me off, because one of the things in Sekiro is you don't dodge. Like in Souls games, you have the iframes to get through massive attacks and stuff. Where Sekiro, you try and do that, you have no iframes. Or a stamina bar.
It's you defend yourself through combat.
Yes, which I was expecting not so much that. You're doing your dodges and your rolls and whatnot.
So, I wouldn't say that it's an experience that I would want for the first time again, but I think I kind of know where you're coming from, where it's not something that landed as hard the first time as it did on a later playthrough when you could appreciate it. Because my first, at least on my own attempt of anything FromSoft was Bloodborne, and I was like, this is kind of neat, but I'm just not really feeling it right now. And it was more so, it had nothing to do with it was difficult and I was definitely hitting walls, but it's because I didn't understand how to really play it, because I was thinking this was just another kind of, I know it had its reputation, but just my experience, mostly when it comes to just things that live on the PlayStation, is this is another kind of just action 3D hack and slasher romp.
And it's nothing like that.
No, it is definitely its own beast. And it's not even so much like, it's a difficult hack and slash game. Like, hack and slash is one of those terms that really needs to be removed from it, even though that is something you are doing a lot of.
Because when people hear hack and slash, they think of Devil May Cry or various games of that nature.
Well, and something that's very button mashy, and you kind of just hit a controller and win. As where what I eventually learned about Bloodborne by actually playing Dark Souls 1 was you gotta kind of figure it. It's almost like learning a fighting game.
Kind of, yeah. It's almost like a puzzle in a sense, but it's trial by combat.
Exactly. So when I finally went back to Bloodborne after loving Dark Souls, I ended up, because I got it, so I enjoyed playing it more. But I still think Dark Souls is personally more enjoyable.
Yes, I would actually fall on that fence, and that might be a bit of a hot take for both of us, but I just like the world of Dark Souls 1 a lot more than Bloodborne. I like the aesthetics of Bloodborne more.
I like the aesthetic of Bloodborne a lot, but I feel more at home in the world of Dark Souls, which is a weird way to put it.
But I know what you mean. Like, everything's just so interconnected and so well designed.
It's
Where Bloodborne, it's just kind of, it's there.
like, I can definitely remember Bloodborne's layout pretty well, but it feels a little bit more disjointed than Dark Souls 1's. Like, if there's something that I would love to just have or see one day, would be just a perfectly 3D rendered, like 3D printing of the Dark Souls map.
That would be pretty cool.
Right? And not that you couldn't do it with Bloodborne, but it would probably be a much wider and branching paths as opposed to...
It would be like putting together a puzzle piece instead of having one solid piece.
Well, I feel like the world of Dark Souls 1 is just kind of like a big cylinder.
Kind of, yeah.
But I could definitely see something with Sekiro. You would much rather going into it thinking, like, this is its own thing as it was.
Yeah, just if I had no previous FromSoft games, Bloodborne or Dark Souls, so I could go into it with a fresh perspective instead of thinking otherwise.
Well,
I think that was a bit of a detriment to my actual first playthrough. Now, luckily, with that said, because I almost gave up on it a few times. Like, there was months between play sessions with it where I'm just like, I can't do this right now. I can't do this right now. Where now that I know what I'm doing in it, I would almost argue that it's probably one of the easiest FromSoft games.
Wasn't the first wall the monkeys?
No. There was an ogre that was kicking my ass pretty good. But I got past him, and it was the first major boss.
Oh, the guy on the horse.
Yes.
Ah, yes.
I can't think of his name now, but...
I think I remember you showing it to me and, like, being like, and this is where I kind of figured out how to actually play Sekiro.
Yes, kind of.
And then you got walled again.
Yes. I would almost argue that the actual time that I started understanding how to play Sekiro, because I finally got over my previous FromSoft hurdle, was right near the end, if it wasn't the last boss.
Which
boss. Is a huge detriment.
But the last boss didn't really play like any of the other enemies for like the first or second phase. Because it was just like, here's lightning.
That was the last phase.
Oh. I also haven't played it, so I can't really speak to my accuracy.
So the final boss really tested your might and knowledge of how the game systems worked. Same with the Demon of Hatred, which... Yeah, he's a fun fight, very difficult, but he plays more similar to like he's almost a Bloodborne style boss. But the final boss of Sekiro does a lot of testing on your Mikiri counters, as they're called, and just various deflection techniques and whatnot, and when to... Like in Souls, you always want to be up close, but you want to be able to dodge. Where Sekiro, you kind of want your distance, but always be close, because you can't dodge away. But then it's a lot more heavily reliant on what the enemy's doing, reading-wise, where in Dark Souls or Bloodborne, the tells are pretty noticeable.
Well, and it's not so bad if the last boss is a wall, because that's kind of the point.
He's a last boss.
Yeah. Yeah.
So what's your next game that you'd want to play for the first time?
So this is one that I wouldn't be too surprised if was also in your list as well. But I would just say, and just out of sheer praise, just be Chrono Trigger.
Yep.
Chrono Trigger's just a masterpiece, and like I know it's got multiple endings, but this is just a game that I'll always have nostalgia for it. But I've definitely played it enough times that like it's never gonna feel fresh again.
And I would almost argue like a lot of the endings in Chrono Trigger are very similar, regardless of the path is the same or not. Like, not too much is actually changing in the end.
There's maybe, I don't know, there's a small handful of endings that actually feel like endings, and then a couple of them are just, very tongue-in-cheek, like the one where you meet the developers.
Yes.
So they feel more like reasons to replay rather than actual impactful things. Now, having said that, I mean, I'll play Chrono Trigger again any day. It's just a solid RPG. But it'll never be that first time when it's just like, not even the going through time part, but like the first time you get the time machine is pretty great. Just becoming friends with a robot and a frog.
Frog is fantastic.
Yeah, and hearing the music for the first time would just be an incredible experience. Like the first time you ever hear the I can't remember this, like the 10,000 BC, just the city in the sky, and it's just all so good.
Yep.
Yeah.
I'm actually a huge fan of the I don't know song names, of course, but when it's the frog song.
I think it's just called Frog's Theme.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I know the one I'm thinking of is called Corridors of Time.
Okay.
But is it? It might be. I digress. And it has a really fun world to explore. The time travel mechanics are just really cool. They're not really...
There's not too many games that do time travel well, and it did it really well.
I mean, for how little it actually did with it, it did enough, right? It didn't get so up its own ass about the whole time travel thing. It just made it fit really well. It didn't try to get too complicated. 100%. There wasn't no, like, you're your own grandpa. So
yeah, nothing like that. The most you could do was a beef jerky. You give a woman beef jerky, and then you can do something in the future because she taught her children that giving is gracious.
Oh yeah, that's right. You can go to the past, and you can either sell the man the beef jerky or just give it to him. And initially, in the present day, you go to the mayor of the town to the south, and he's just like, I'm so rich, dance like a chicken and I'll give you $10. And then if you do that thing where you give the jerky to his ancestor in the past, they're all super generous and super nice. And I want to say doing this will end up netting you like one of those black chests that have the really good items.
I think so, yeah.
But it's just, you didn't even have to bother, but you were able to engage with the time travel mechanics. There's the quest where... and it's completely optional, where you go fly to the random island and there's the dilapidated castle. So you have to keep going to the past and then getting it repaired a little bit more and more, and then go to the future, deal with the ghost in the castle, and just keep digging deeper and deeper. And then it ends up being like a super impactful quest for Frog.
Mm-hmm.
And this is all just super optional stuff. And then this is where I'm going to get into the spoiler territory for... Just play Chrono Trigger, for God's sakes.
Yeah, if you haven't played Chrono Trigger yet, then you
what
honestly don't know
here?
what you're missing. Yeah, go play Chrono Trigger. It's fantastic.
You could beat the game without the protagonist.
Yeah.
That's incredible. Or you can end up recruiting and just beating the game with the main antagonist, or what you may think. Yeah, just an incredible game. And it is very much one of those, not about the journey, but the destination. And I think that's just where I'll leave it with Chrono Trigger for now, because I could just go on forever.
The journey is pretty good, too. Like, when you can leave, or cultivating the forest, for example, with Robo.
Yeah. It's one of the
Just
few time paradoxes that they actually shove in your face.
Yeah, and there's a couple of them that work really, really well.
Just go play Chrono Trigger.
Just go play Chrono Trigger. If you haven't, find a way.
But yeah, that would be the next.
It's on the Ouya.
It's on the Ouya. Always is. But what would be something else you'd want to try to do for the first time?
So, I got a few here. But one I'm going to bring up is A Link to the Past.
You know what's funny? I was actually thinking, because I knew Breath of the Wild is something that we could both agree on for the fact that, like, I want to say that everyone who has played it could almost say the whole, like, it'll never be as, like, they could still love it, but, like, not be as good as the first time they played it.
Yeah.
But I was also...
Go ahead.
I was going to say, like, yeah, Link to the Past, but I would actually more so for myself argue Ocarina of Time.
Yeah, I mean, there's actually a lot of Zelda games from the retro era, as it's known now, that would be fantastic to play for the first time. I chose Link to the Past just because it's probably my favorite Zelda game, still to this day. And when I first played it, I was young enough that I couldn't appreciate it. And I mean, I still can, but nowadays I already know, like, it's ingrained in my memory where everything is. There's no sense of discovery anymore, where I feel if I never played it back in the day and I was just getting into it now, I would absolutely love that factor of the world, just because it is so tightly knit. Like, it's a fair for the Super Nintendo, an action game like Zelda. It's has a decent sized overworld, 2 of them technically, and there's just a lot to discover and a lot of secrets in it that I can't scrub from my memory, and I'll never get the surprise of discovering it again.
See, I think for myself, because I actually like Link to the Past more than I like Ocarina of Time, but I feel it's a lot of fun to replay. It's kind of interesting to me to do things kind of differently how I would have when I was a kid, because it definitely felt like a really big game when I was younger, and now it's neat that I can sit down with Link to the Past for, I don't know, like 5 hours or so, still feel like I'm playing it casually, but also be like, I'm halfway through the Temples in the Dark World.
If you haven't beat it by then.
Yeah. And it still feels kind of neat to stumble across, like, the secrets and whatnot, and just kind of walk into an area and be like, oh yeah, that's right, there's something over here.
Yeah.
As where Ocarina of Time, because it went for a much more kind of grand and cinematic, as much as you could for the N64, it feels slower.
Yes.
And not slower that I'm in control of either. It is like, now I have to go to the Forest Temple. Now I have to go to... And it's not to say that because Link to the Past has that little bit of, like, freedom in the later half, because it is still a rather linear game. But yeah, it just feels a lot more... You get into the Gerudo Valley and then you're stuck there because you can't escape for like an hour and a half, and it's one of those things that as you're coming up to it, you're just like, I don't want to do this, but I have to.
So I think one issue with Ocarina of Time is just the age of it. It was one of the early 3D games that came out for Nintendo, right? Where now we've seen a lot better games, if you will, and a lot more fuller games. So one thing, like, when I think of Ocarina of Time now, like, it's still a fine game. I still have a lot of nostalgia for it. I don't think it holds up.
Did you ever beat Ocarina of Time?
Oh, 100%. I know back in the day I had the player's guide. We always got the player's guides for like half the games that we owned, just as like birthday presents, nice cheap things to have, and it's kind of memorabilia. I'm kind of upset that I don't have any of those anymore. But yeah, I've done all the gold what are they called? Gold Skulltulas?
Skulltula.
Spatulas. Um, and yeah, I've explored that map quite a bit. And yeah, it is. I think enough time has passed now that I don't really remember a whole lot about it. That I could go back in and still like rediscover things, because it's not nearly as ingrained in my head as A Link to the Past is. But I think the reason that it feels a little slow is just because that was the standard at the time. Like, that was incredible at the time. Whereas since then, we've seen a lot, things done a lot better. And I think it's a discussion that we could have later on a future episode. But just the whole idea that 2D games hold up a lot better than the early 3D stuff. But then that can be argued that you look at Atari and everything is just rough.
Yeah, I don't think much held up on the Atari very well. I'm sure someone could argue that with me, but I'm not about to actually agree with that argument.
But then if you think about it, like the golden age of 2D games was also the early age of 3D games.
Yep. This
so
is true.
I honestly think if they did a proper remake of Ocarina of Time and fill in that overworld and fill in those empty spots and make it feel like an actual world, it would be absolutely stunning.
Not just give it a coat of paint, but actually like the full on.
Yeah, not like the 3DS version did compared to the N64, but like a full on remake. I don't even care if you change the graphics or not, just make that world more full, make it seem more alive, make it feel like people aren't just there to cater to you.
Not a Final Fantasy VII remake, but like a Resident Evil 1 remake.
Yeah. Touch it up, make it feel more alive.
Yeah.
Because it does feel really slow, and I think a lot of that is just because we've been so used to more modern days when everything feels more full.
I'd also be scared I wouldn't like it.
This is also true. and again, another topic for another day, but you could remake anything and people are going to bitch.
Well, this is true. I just mean, like, if I were to play Ocarina of Time for the first time again, now, because this is one of the things we haven't really elaborated, but it's not like we're making rules for this, but, like, when we say for the first time, do we mean, like, as in, like, when it comes to the more nostalgic stuff, see it through our eyes now? Because that, if we're going with that premise, yeah, Ocarina of Time, if I was just like, I've never played this before, I'd be like,
Yeah, I don't know if I would enjoy it myself.
But moving away from at least Ocarina of Time, because, Zelda, we can go on about that for a while, I'm sure. But something for me, and this one kind of requires being spoilery about it, but it would be specifically Mega Man 04.
Okay.
Yeah, and the reason for that is because it's one of those one specific experiences I would like to have occur again, which would be the ending really caught me off guard.
I mean, that's pretty fair. That's kind of what you want, right?
It is, and of course, when you know what an ending is, it's never gonna hit you like it did before. So, did you make it through the entirety of at least the Mega Man Zero games on the collection?
No, I finished at 3.
Okay.
I finished 3, and then I went on to other games.
Alright, well, I think it's pretty safe to say what's gonna occur at the end of a franchise. And we're well past the point that I have to worry about the plot being ruined for you. But,
yeah.
So the first time I ever played Mega Man 04 was entirely in Japanese. So, relatively up to date with the plot, but I'm here for the action, right? It's a Mega Man game. But the plot is still, it's still there. It has some degree of importance, so I'm going to want to know it at some point.
Why is X bad?
Well, I knew why X was bad, because at least I had done 1 to 3 in English up to this point. Just playing the fourth one before it actually got released via yearly okay memes. And so I got to the end of the game and do the final boss fight, and it's a pretty epic boss fight, but I don't actually know the context of it. I'm just thinking, here we go again, Zero, off to finish another adventure. And I beat the final boss, and then a whole bunch of text that I'm not about to understand occurs, and like a bunch of explosions and whatnot, thinking, it's the other end of a game, Zero, let's see what our next adventure involves. And then, just after the credits, it just shows his mangled helmet and corpse in the desert, and it's just like... he's dead! Like, actually dead! So yeah, and the reason why we need to do that again for the first time is just because I'm never gonna not know he's dead again.
Yeah. And didn't the series start as they thought he was dead and they were able to repair him?
It's a really weird kind of like unintentional timeline split where in the 5th Mega Man X game, I think, at the end of it, it's like Zero's like getting sealed away, kind of like they did with X initially, and then it was supposed to like, this is going to lead up into the Mega Man Zero series. But then they made Mega Man X6 and everyone got really confused. So that's a hot mess for another day.
Yes.
Yeah. What's next for yourself?
For myself, I'm actually going to do a couple, and it's for the same reasons as you, and that's going to be Amori and Mother 3.
Okay, that's fair.
I'm not going to go into spoiler territories.
I'm not going to go into spoiler territories as well, but I am going to say on Mother 3 for myself, I don't want to experience that again. That is too much.
Oh, just wait till you play Omori.
No.
So that's one thing. I know you haven't played it, but I know you're willing to.
Yep.
But you have played Mother 3, and with Mother 3, it's not so much because of the ending, but it's the journey and just kind of wackiness. Like, you're following the protagonist, and at the beginning you're following all these different characters, and you're trying to figure out how this all lines up with one another. And just the overall story and whatnot is just very, of course, being a Mother game is very quirky and whatnot, but just how hard it hits you. Like, there's very few games that can hit me that hard in the feels, if that makes sense.
Yep.
And Amori is under the same kind of principle, where the ending, I'm even going to say, like, the last third, if not half, of Amori is just this wacky trip that just, you want to find out how to resolve this issue. And the more you learn, the more everything just starts to crumble. And it really hits you on how bad this situation is, and you want to fix it. And maybe that makes me a little bit on the darker side, but at the same time, it's just, they're two very powerful feeling games. And there's very few games that can actually inflict that kind of emotion on myself anyways. And I can do nothing but appreciate that. But now that that's done and I've experienced them, I'm not going to be able to experience it with them again. I can still feel for the ending of Mother 3 and Amori. But that first time experiencing like that amount of overwhelmingness through a damn video game was just, it was so intense and so kind of meaningful.
And here I am just thinking to myself, because you mentioned that, like, you know, maybe I just happen to prefer things a little on the darker side, and I'm thinking, I want to play Hatred for the first time again, so I can know what it's like to experience hatred. But no,
again, video game format.
Yes, video game format. That's a game I did not play, and which, oh boy. But I can definitely see what you mean. It's definitely, like, at least for speaking for Mother 3, you know, and this can go with any media, movies, books, what have you. But if it's got a really strong emotional gut punch or through line that really resonates with you, that'll never come up naturally again, right? You're always going to know it's coming. So, though it would be the reason why you have such a strong attachment to it, it's never going to be a first-time experience again.
No, you're never going to get that gut punch again.
Oh,
And
you'll
not
get
that
it
anyone,
again. You
not,
just...
not that anyone wants that gut punch, but I mean, no one wants that kind of impact, or no one's going to get that kind of impact if you know the impact before ages before it comes again.
We can probably elaborate this on this lightly just because it happens at the very start. But I mean, you and I can both agree, like the Flint fireplace scene.
Oh yes,
You know, it's always going to be incredible when you watch it, especially because like it's beautifully animated and it's like so weighty. But at the same time, you're never gonna have that first like, whoa, he actually went there kind of response again, right? You're just gonna know that like you can actually just see it in a different perspective of like how tragically hit this man has been.
well, especially when you've been controlling that character for that whole section of game leading up to that point, and then you lose control of him.
Well, he loses control of him though, and you can
Yeah,
feel
but
that.
Yeah, but think about it this way: you are controlling Flint until he no longer lets you because he's lost control.
That. Oh dear.
That just makes it so much worse, doesn't it?
That's gonna be. Yeah, we're definitely gonna have to dedicate some time solely to that game.
Yes.
All right, I think I've got one more here that I can fire off.
All right.
And this is one that I know that you've dabbled into recently for the first time ever. But for me, it would be Legend of Mana.
You know what? I was kind of thinking about putting that on my list.
Interesting.
However, with that said, I kind of had my first playthrough happen again, per se. And what I mean by that is, like, I played it back when I was a kid on PlayStation. And I never beat it, but I really enjoyed it. I just couldn't figure out, I soft locked the game or something. And I was really upset by that. But then when it got its port to the Switch, would you call it? I guess it was a remaster, wasn't it?
It's like really light on remaster, but I mean, you know, they did touch some things up. They changed some mechanics, so remaster works.
So that was kind of my first start again, because you're figuring that's, I'm going to say, over 20 years since being able to play it. Haven't played it since the PS1, and then getting to play it on Switch, and I find out so much more. And then being a kid when I first played it, I didn't quite grasp everything that was going on.
Yeah.
So I kind of had my first playthrough. Not quite, because I still remember the first town and all that kind of stuff. Domina or something.
Hometown Domina, yep.
So I still remember that, and your home, the mana tree, or no, it wasn't the mana tree. Whatever, your home you put down with a mailbox. And that kind of stuff, but I didn't remember any of the storylines or anything.
So would you say that, like, your secondary first experience pretty much made up for it then?
Oh, 100%. I really, really enjoyed when I actually played through it.
See, as where, in contrast to me, I have also been playing Legend of Mana since I was young, but, like, I went hard on it. And I figured out everything about this game. And so I still like playing it to this day. Because it's a really weird game.
Oh, yeah.
Like, so incredible. The entire game itself is pretty much just like, you don't have to do this, but you can if you're interested.
Well, it's like very, very interesting and neat side missions.
It's pretty much side quest the game,
It's not so much one overall arcing story, although there are a couple of those, but it's very much, this is the world you live in. Do good.
And you are the least important main character ever.
Yeah, there's no emphasis on you. You're just someone trying to make a difference.
But it would just be really cool, I don't know, do you just think of the weird stuff that happens, like the first time you ever see it, it's just like there's a creature that's just literally a fish in a basket with feet. Or the first time you ever went up and talked to a Sproutling and it's just like, Sproutlings have no souls. And you're just like, okay.
Good for you.
Yeah.
And we have it to thank for the bringing to life of Little Cactus.
I love Little Cactus.
Who doesn't?
I just want to tell him how my day went. But, yeah, I would say that would be probably the last experience I would want. Well, I mean, there's many more, but we'll keep it at that for myself for today. But how about you? You got one more to close out on?
Yeah, and I'm going to kind of do 3 in 1. Mostly because they are kind of puzzle-based. But we got Battle Block Theater by Behemoth, who I love their games. They're just fantastic. But with Battle Block Theater, as fun as it is, once you play it, you kind of know what you're doing. It makes replay value very, very minimal unless you're trying to collect everything. The Sexy Brutale. It's a very Groundhog Day kind of puzzle game. You got to try and figure things out. Who's dying and why, and how to stop it till you save everyone. Again, once you know what's going on and the overall how to do things, you lose that ability. 2 fantastic games that you're kind of destroyed on because you know what you're doing. And you won't unlearn that unless you... Well, I suppose if you didn't play it for a long-ass time, you'd technically be able to. But, I mean, I haven't played Sexy Brutale since... Well, it's got to be over 5 years. I still remember a good amount of things in there just because it was so well presented. And the last one I want to bring up is kind of a 2-parter, but Pony Island and The Hex, which are both made by the dev of Inscription.
Games that I don't know the details of, but I know enough about that it's just like, you could describe it as a one-trick pony. Ha 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 ha. But yeah, it's gonna scare you.
So, like, Pony Island is... You're essentially the devil's taking your soul, and you're trapped inside this game about ponies, and it is anything but a pony game. And it is an absolute, well, for lack of better terms, a absolute mindfuck. And the Hex still has that mind messing up, but it's more about a murder mystery, and you got to go through different characters and experience their thing and how they came to this bar where you're trying to figure out who murdered who. And they all have their different playstyles and whatnot, and all have an overall story. But once you find out about who murdered and who it is you're looking for, it's kind of game over. You know how it ends, so you won't get as much enjoyment trying to figure out what is actually happening. And yeah, kind of one-trick pony with these games. Pun intended.
It's kind of like how it's kind of hard to play it when you already know that occurs, but how everyone's talked about how in Doki Doki Panic, how, you know, you're actually just a reskinned Mario game.
Yeah.
By which I mean Doki Doki Literature Club, and how it's just a pure nightmare.
I was going to say, wait, where are you going with this?
Apparently the direction where I need to, I just had to stumble on the way. Yeah, it's the kind of game that you just benefit from going in absolutely blind, right? And as cool as it was to experience, you've already seen the rug's already been pulled, and now you're just standing on the floor.
Yeah.
So.
And that's one thing I've noticed about myself is the games I really, really, really get into and really enjoy are those style of games where once you know the ending, it kind of falls flat on replay value, which is upsetting. And granted, like games like Amori, I've done 3 playthroughs, so I can get the neutral, good, and bad endings, which they have enough difference in them, so it makes it worthwhile. But a lot of the main areas are still being repeated, but at least they end differently. But games like Pony Island or Sexy Brutale or Battle Block Theater, I already know what I need to know.
I think a similar case for me were one of those games where the narrative or the twist is pretty much the one reason that like almost discourage replaying, just because again it's kind of been spoiled already, would be 13 Sentinels. That is a game that is very much narrative driven, and as cool as it is, you know, you never go, unless you like go to it a long time later and forget the plot, like it's always going to be, and that is a game that is heavily dependent on its wild twists and turns. But
so if you kind of know where it leads up to, that trying to figure it out in your head effect isn't there.
No, it's not going to have that compelling drive. But I think I can't talk about 13 Sentinels more because it's a game that you can't know about.
Right. And I still got to play it.
Yes. But
so
yeah.
It's any other thing that you want to bring up? Any other games that you can think of last minute that weren't on your list?
Oh, yes, and that's the dilemma.
Pick one.
You know what? I think what I'll do is I will tease another potential subject down the road, because while I was making my list, a lot of things had crossed my mind, and of a genre that is very much one that I know we're both fond of, and it's like Metroidvania. So I was thinking, you know, like Hollow Knight, Metroid Dread, all that stuff. Those were all incredible experiences, but I kind of think they're better experiences when you replay them.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I would agree. Like, my first time in Hollow Knight, where I really enjoyed it, I actually quite enjoyed a second playthrough because I got way more into it.
I don't know, something about that formula. It's a lot better, like, feeling more flowy than Discovery. And the Discovery is one of the greatest things about playing it for the first time, but it's a lot more fun to come back and feel like you've mastered it.
And I think part of that is just because you know how powerful you can get versus how you start off at. So it's all about gaining that power back.
Not to mention...
Versus... And I mean, Metroid... a lot of Metroid games are like this, right? Where they start you off with the power-ups and then you lose them.
Well, and not to mention, too, there's always the incredible joy of sequence breaking.
Yes,
yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, but that's where I'm going to leave that. How about you? Any kind of, like, rapid-fire thoughts?
Not so much, aside from, like, a couple story games or experiences, which, regardless if I play it for the first time, I'm not gonna get the proper effect of it. Games like Half-Life.
Ooh, good.
That was
point.
a game I played back in the day, but even if I played it for the first time now, I don't think it would have nearly as big an impact. Kind of similar to Ocarina of Time.
Yeah, that's
if
actually
I played
kind
it for
of...
the first time now, I wouldn't have as big impact on me as it did back in the day.
It's kind of how I feel about Ocarina of Time, where it's like, you know the motions you're going to go through, right?
Yeah.
So, I'm going to have to do this thing to get to there and whatnot, and this pipe's going to knock over, and I'm going to struggle with the janky platforming for a bit.
It's a Zelda game. Collect 8.
Pretty much, yeah. Well, you want to do the honors of struggling to close us out again?
Sure. Because I think I've exhausted my list and my thoughts and my ideas for this. So, with that said, I've been Josh. The other guy's been Tyler.
Yeah.
Because he doesn't like introducing himself.
Nope.
And this has been the Optional Boss Podcast. Hope you enjoyed the episode, and we will see you next time.
Bye!